It's now Fox News producer Carlos Van Meek, as I was saying earlier, traveling with the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing. Hey, Carlos, what have you got?
Yeah, John, we're here at this air base just south of Iraq, where 8 F-16s returned just a short while ago, all reportedly hitting strategic targets just northwest of Baghdad. Air Force officials here calling it a success. No more details on that, but when we get them, we'll go ahead and get them to you. Meanwhile, I'm going to let photographer Paul Monge zoom past me to get a shot of some A-10s that are parked right behind me. It's a much different scene than it was a short while ago. The pace seems to have slowed a bit. A different story than a few hours ago when an endless stream of fighter aircraft headed into the night sky here, heading for targets into Iraq. Those aircraft, including F-16s, F-18 Hornets, Harriers, and the A-10s right there, like the ones you're looking at. Most of these aircraft carry laser-guided or satellite-guided munitions, and all these aircraft can provide close air support when needed. Still no word on how many sorties have been flown this night, but yesterday's numbers totaled about 144. With the shock and awe campaign in full swing, we'll see shortly whether those numbers are going to increase. In the meantime, we're expecting a full brief in a few hours from this location, and when we get that information, we'll get it to you as soon as possible.
Carlos Van Meek with the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing, looking at those A-10 Warthogs. Carlos, thanks very much. Saddam Hussein, alive or dead? If Saddam is alive, the Iraqi dictator has figured out a way to survive not one, not two, but 3 major conflicts over the past 20 years. An 8-year battle with neighbor Iran, the 1991 Gulf War, and of course, the coalition bombing raids of the past few days. Joining us now, co-author of Out of the Ashes, The Resurrection of Saddam Hussein, Andrew Cockburn. Mr. Cockburn, are you a guessing man? Just to start things off, is he alive or dead today?
I'm guessing he's alive. I think the fact that broadcast, didn't look to me like it had been taped beforehand. If it had, it had been wearing a smarter suit. He did survive, and he was very anxious to get on the air as quickly as possible to show he was alive. If you remember in the Gulf War, when we tried to hit him then too, he stayed out of sight most of the time. So I think he's still with us, unfortunately.
All right. Now, before we get into why he's able to survive so many close calls, give me your estimation of how rattled or how not rattled he is by the close call he had.
Well, he's not irrational, he'd be rattled, but he's, this is a street fighter. He was a teenage hitman. He spent years wearing smart suits and being the statesman, but he's basically a very tough guy from the streets. So in a way, he'd be used to this. He's been in very tight spots before, as you mentioned, during the war with Iran, during the last Gulf War, and even before that, back in his days as a revolutionary gunman. He was in very tight spots indeed. So I think he wouldn't be enjoying it much, but it's something he can deal with.
Why, since you've studied him so much and so well, maybe you can explain why he has this urge to live on the brink, to constantly be confronting forces that could easily overwhelm him. Why does he go down this road?
It's an interesting question. I always think he's a kind of a gambler. He likes to roll the dice. He didn't have to go to war with Iran, which was a huge disaster. Bled his country dry, killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. He certainly didn't have to invade Kuwait. I think it's almost like he gets bored sometimes. The other thing is you have to remember, he likes a fight. As I said before, he's a fighter. And I think, his image of himself seems to require that every so often he gets into some life or death situation. He also thinks that helped, up till now at least, that's helped him politically internally. Of course, this is a different business.
Is it your view that this is the end for him?
Yes, yes, obviously I think so, like everyone else. And like most of his army. I remember last time talking to Iraqi soldiers who'd been in Kuwait right after the war, and they said, well, we couldn't believe up till the last minute that he was going to do it. We thought it was all a political maneuver and there would be no war. He'd make some deal, he'd pull out ahead of time. We couldn't believe he was going to leave us faced with the United States and the rest of the coalition. I think the feeling must be the same this time. And apart from a few diehards from his own tribe, I don't think many people will fight for him.
We're looking at Baghdad burning. When can we expect his key generals to separate themselves from him and end this?
The moment they're absolutely sure that he can't come and get them, I think, because the consequences for, jumping ship too early and getting caught in Saddam's Baghdad are pretty unpleasant.
And that's literally going to take finding him and dropping a bomb on him?
I think so. I think he'll go down fighting. I mean, maybe he'll be isolated and alone by then, but there'll be no Saddam going into exile, with the, in some Saudi guest house or something like that. There's a story he likes to tell about once before when he was cornered. He was on the run before he took power, and he was cornered in a house, trapped by security forces, and the guys he was with said, "Let's surrender, we haven't a hope." And he said, "No, we'll fight the last bullet, then we'll try and get away." So I think, I'm not sure where he thinks he can get away to, but he'll certainly fight to the last bullet.
Are his two sons, Qusay and Uday, are they as good as he is? Are they as smart as he is? Are they as ruthless?
Ruthless, certainly. Uday's certainly not as smart. Uday's kind of a psychopathic lout. Qusay is smart. He's kind of creepy, but he's the smart one. He's the younger son, I should say, and he's the one that Saddam has trusted with some very important jobs, running the security services. Now he's kind of the alternate president. So if something does happen to Saddam, or if something has happened to Saddam, Qusay would be the one who'd take over. Uday is as I say, he's a psychopathic lout. I will say, I think I once had the opportunity to observe them at very close quarters. They were actually behaved like perfect gentlemen. It was kind of surreal. They were quite well-mannered and talked interestingly about Las Vegas, as a matter of fact. But they didn't behave like what I knew they were, which was these very bloodthirsty little monsters.
Mr. Cockburn, co-author of Out of the Ashes, The Resurrection of Saddam Hussein, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
In the middle of managing wartime security, the Bush administration is taking new steps to keep government secrets safely locked up. The change involves getting rid of some Clinton-era rules. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano shines a light on this aspect of government secrecy. So, what happened?
Well, before 1995, if a document was classified as secret by any aspect of the federal government, it remains secret forever, unless the president or the CIA in a future time was persuaded to declassify it. President Clinton signed an order in 1995 automatically declassifying whatever had been classified for 25 years and saying the shelf life for classified documents is 10 years. President Bush is about to change this and say, wait a minute, we just can't have the wholesale declassification of documents. It could affect the military, it could affect the FBI, it could affect people who are living and still working for the government. We're going to take a look at document by document. The Clinton order said, if there's any doubt, declassify. The Bush order says, if there's any doubt, classify.
Okay, what relevance does it have to what we're watching right now?
Well, the relevance to what we're watching right now is, when can scholars look at this war? When can people learn why equipment fails? When can people look at the Gulf War back in the early 90s? Those documents are about to be released, and they won't be as long as George Bush stays president.
Well, now, I know that you have a keen eye for these things. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
In time of war, it's probably a good thing to keep secrets from getting disseminated. In time of peace, it's good for scholars to know what the history was and what happened. Maybe President Bush will change his mind when the war is over, but at the moment, who wants all these documents from the Gulf War to be declassified? It can only hurt us.
Critics want it.
Of course they do. Critics of the president, critics of the government, critics of the United States.
And historians. Can't forget the historians. Judge Andrew Napolitano, thank you very much. Let me just remind you where we stand. The shock and awe campaign began today. Brett Baer reports to us from the Pentagon that between 1,000 and 1,500 precision weapons fell on Baghdad and its environs, including 320 cruise missiles launched from ships or from B-52s. This war has gotten very serious, and although many people think Saddam Hussein is still alive, they also think he was in the building that was bombed. More coverage now with Britt Hume.
Next on a special edition of Special Report, The night sky above Baghdad fills with fire and smoke as the much-anticipated air assault begins after the hoped-for high-level surrenders failed to materialize in time. Coalition ground forces race toward Baghdad, meanwhile, facing what the Pentagon calls only sporadic resistance, and Iraq's southern oil fields are all but fully secured with only a handful of fires started. At least 6 Marines have died, but apparently only 1 as a result of enemy fire. We'll have full live coverage and analysis. Stay tuned. Welcome to Washington. I'm Britt Hume. We should be looking momentarily at a live picture. There it is of the night sky over Baghdad at just after 2 a.m. At 8:19 p.m. earlier Iraqi time today, the U.S. military unleashed the leading edge of a massive series of airstrikes on Baghdad and other cities in Iraq. And it was both shocking and awesome, as it was promised to be. Shortly after the bombing campaign began, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld told reporters the Iraqi regime is, quote, starting to lose control of their country. For the latest on Operation Iraqi Freedom Now, Fox News Pentagon correspondent Brett Baird joins us now live. Brett.
Hi, Britt. Tonight, air raid sirens can be heard again in the city of Baghdad, and senior defense officials say to expect more massive airstrikes before this night is through. As battle damage assessment is continuing, the march to Baghdad continues as well. As far as who is in control of Iraq, there are still questions about that, and according to one senior defense official, quote, if any command and control is left in Baghdad, by tomorrow, they will be completely out of touch with their forces. Shortly before 9 p.m. Baghdad time, Iraq's air defenses started firing into the sky.
No explosions that I've seen inside the city.
Then the barrage began.
And a few minutes ago, the air war in Iraq began.
So very close to us. We've got to watch the windows here. I hope you can still hear me.
90 minutes of intense strikes. A host of targets hit, including 3 of Saddam Hussein's palaces, Ba'ath Party headquarters, and Republican Guard troop positions.
We did not choose this war. Saddam Hussein was given a choice by the international community. Give up your weapons of mass murder or lose power. He chose unwisely, and now he will lose both.
In the first wave, more than 1,200 bombs and missiles hit targets across the country. More than 300 Tomahawk cruise missiles fired submarines. B-2 stealth bombers dropped dozens of precision-guided bombs. Carrier-based attack aircraft struck other targets in northern Iraq, the cities of Mosul, Kirkuk, and Tikrit. In a few days, coalition troops will have surrounded Baghdad. Senior defense officials say so far, the resistance has been fairly light, but still present.
Clearly, we're moving towards our objectives, but we must not get too comfortable. We're basically on our plan and moving towards Baghdad, but there are still many unknowns out there.
One of the unknowns, the fate of Saddam Hussein. But senior defense officials can definitively say Iraq's military is losing control.
The confusion of Iraqi officials is growing. Their ability to see what is happening on the battlefield, to communicate with their forces, and to control their country is slipping away.
To the right of that column of smoke, you can see flames. Now, keep in mind, that's several miles away.
A handful of oil wells are still on fire tonight in southern Iraq. But coalition forces have secured the oil fields, and now oil fire specialists are being flown in to fight the fires. Hundreds of Iraqi soldiers have already surrendered to coalition troops. Others have simply walked away from the battlefield. This is exclusive video of last night's crash of a CH-46 transport helicopter. It's night vision video. 4 U.S. Marines and 8 British Royal Marines died in what is being described as a tragic accident. Today, 2 more U.S. Marines died while trying to secure southern Iraqi cities and targets. The giant green light there you see is the remains, what's left of that crash as it happened yesterday. Now, today's operation, we're told, went off very well, except there was one major hiccup, and that was Turkey. After the Turkish parliament approved overflight rights late today, the Turkish government took back that. They essentially reneged on that deal, saying the U.S. military could not fly over Turkey. After some what we're calling not so diplomatic talks, Turkey then allowed the overflight rights in 2 different columns over their country, and now U.S. military planes are able to fly over Turkey for further strikes. Britt?
Brett, one of the operations that General Myers described at that briefing, and by the way, that picture you're seeing on the left of your screen is the live picture of Baghdad, and we will go to that picture and other pictures of Baghdad at any moment should events warrant that. So stay tuned, folks. I was just going to say, Brett, he talked about an operation involving the waters just off southern Iraq, where there was a ship boarded, and tell us about that, Brett.
Right. U.S. and British ships confronted and intercepted 3 Iraqi vessels in the waters just off of Iraq in the southern port area. Those vessels contained mines, many mines. They managed to capture those ships and took them out. They are not a harm to the U.S. military, and those waters, we're told tonight, are clear.
Brett Baer, thank you very much. At the height of today's intense bombing campaign in Iraq, our sister network Sky News was talking to David Chater, its correspondent in Baghdad. The following is a portion of his narration and conversations with Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson.
There's another fire. Watch out. Oh. Okay, well, those are very large bombs. Those must be the 1,000-pounders, I would have thought. Much, much larger explosions than last time. Huge shock waves coming through the balcony and the open doors where I'm standing. That huge, intense barrage coming down from the skies or from cruise missiles is impossible for me to say because I don't want to expose myself out there. But it's had the same effect on the ACAC crews and the air defenses. They seem to be suppressed at the moment. Hello?
Yes, David, keep going. Can you hear me?
I think I've lost my line.
You're still with us, David.
There's a whole shroud of smoke covering all the lamps in the city at the moment. All the traffic is gone. A really intense barrage and series of explosions. Intense percussions and shockwaves rolling across the Tigris at the moment.
A slice of live television as it appeared on Sky News and on Fox News earlier in the day. We're keeping an eye, as we note there, on that live picture of Baghdad, and we'll pick up there if anything happens. The big question in Washington today, meanwhile, was whether Saddam Hussein actually survived that missile attack targeting him and other Iraqi leaders that began the war on Wednesday night. Fox News senior White House correspondent Jim Angle reports on that.
Top administration officials declined to bury Saddam Hussein today, saying they just don't know his fate, in spite of some indications he is no longer in control.
I hear scraps of information, and you can be certain if I had a sufficient number of scraps that it began to make a persuasive case that I would opine on it.
Some Pentagon officials believe Hussein was at least seriously wounded late Wednesday when American forces attacked a location where he and his sons were thought to be spending the night. Iraqi TV showed Hussein twice the next day, including this speech, and released another tape today. But no one accepts videotaped appearances as proof of anything.
The fact that Iraq released a tape doesn't tell anybody anything about where Saddam Hussein is or is not.
Officials tell Fox the U.S. is getting a lot of intelligence about Hussein, some based on contacts with the Iraqi military. But one official says some reports indicate Hussein is alive, others that he's dead, and still more that he is seriously wounded, but that no one has anything definitive or conclusive. Everyone has an opinion, an official says, but no one has conclusive proof. Whatever evidence there is was probably shared with the top 5 leaders of Congress today during a classified briefing at the White House with President Bush and his defense secretary. The president offered reporters a sanitized update.
We're making progress. We will stay on task until we've achieved our objective, which is to rid Iraq of weapons of mass destruction and free the Iraqi people.
Without mentioning the first 2 Americans killed in combat or others killed in a helicopter crash, the president praised those he's sent into battle.
All of us involved here in Washington are extremely proud of the skill and bravery of our young Americans who are willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves.
And there was an interesting glimpse of Mr. Bush's decision-making style today. Though he regularly consults with his advisors about the conduct of the war, today's shift to the long-planned shock and awe approach was not a presidential decision.
No, the president leaves these matters up to the military commanders. The president has signed off on the war plan, and then the president leaves it to the members of the military, the leadership, to make the determinations about what the exact right time it is.
The president will continue to supervise the war, to oversee it, officials say, but will leave the day-to-day decisions to the military. The president believes, Fleischer said, that the most successful way of winning a war is to let the experts run it. Britt?
Jim, I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. First of all, this is the time when we always hear about the fabled War Powers Act. What about that?
Well, the president did send a letter up to Congress today, Britt. War Powers, of course, gives you 60 days of forces in combat conditions and another 30 days at the president's discretion. But as you know, no president has ever accepted War Powers Act. So President Bush did what other presidents has done, which is send a letter to Congress and say, consistent with the War Powers Act, I am hereby notifying you, so on and so forth. They never accept that they are covered by it, but they send a letter saying, consistent with it, we will let you know, so that they avoid any sort of confrontation with Congress.
I'm Hussein, and what may be his condition. There have been reports that medical assistance was required for someone at the site of that bombing on the first night. What do we know about that?
That's right, Britt. Officials have told us that urgent medical assistance was called to that location, and they are reasonably certain, as one official puts it, that Saddam Hussein was in fact at that location at the time. But they do not know if it was Saddam Hussein who needed that attention. Now, one official says that when you drop 10,000 pounds of ordnance on a place, somebody is going to get hurt, but no one knows whether that casualty or whether Saddam Hussein was one of the casualties. Britt.
All right, Jim Angle, thanks very much. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld said today, quote, the confusion of Iraqi officials is growing. Their ability to see what is going on the battlefield, to communicate with their forces, and to control their country is slipping away, end quote. So that, coupled with the uncertainty of Saddam's status, raises an important question. Who is now in charge of the Iraqi military? Fox News correspondent Carl Cameron joins us live with some information about a potential threat involving Iraqis in this country as well. Carl.
Thanks, Britt. Well, Fox News has learned that both U.S. and Mexican authorities are on the lookout right now for 6 Iraqi nationals said to be in possession of, quote, toxic material. Sources say the Iraqis may be at large in either northern Mexico or southern United States, and investigators are pursuing information that suggests, according to one Homeland Security official, that the so-called toxic material may have required, quote, temperature controls, which that official suggested could indicate that the material might be either biological or radiological. Sources say the investigation has been underway for about 2 days, and so far they have not been able to find any information to corroborate the existence of these 6 Iraqis. Sources say they sought help to be smuggled into the United States from Mexico from illegal human smugglers, what are called coyotes, usually for Mexican illegal aliens trying to come into this country illegally. The investigation now 2 days old. Officials say they are taking it very seriously. The information has come from a combination of tips as well as undercover investigations of illegal immigration. And one official has suggested that the source of the information has not been proven and its credibility is in doubt. And yet many other officials saying tonight they are taking it very seriously, Brett.
Carl, what about this whole question of the command and control, though? What do you know about that?
Well, this is going back overseas. U.S. officials are very carefully monitoring the command and control communications of the Iraqi military leadership. And in talking to a variety of officials today, both outside the Pentagon as well as in, one top official said that their communications are, quote, sporadic and jumbled. He went on to say, we don't know who's in charge. We don't think they know who's in charge. They're confused, disoriented, and disorganized, and it's only going to get much worse for them. Sources say since that attack on Saddam Hussein's bunker 2 nights ago, there has been virtually no communications between the Iraqi top leadership and the rest of the field. That has contributed to this growing attitude that the Iraqi military is in a state of disarray and continuing to melt down literally with each passing hour. It should also be noted that the Iraqi military has actually put out rewards for its soldiers, saying that for fighting and for taking down American or allied forces, there would be a financial reward. Bribing soldiers is taken to be another sign that there is increasing weakness. And then there is the talk of the ongoing defections and attempts to surrender. And sources are now telling us that one top Iraqi official has actually been put under arrest by Saddam Hussein's son Qusay, not Saddam himself. The man's name is Lieutenant Colonel Hassan Sami Takitri. He is the director of military security for Iraq's 1st Army Corps and a key intelligence official. Intelligence sources telling us that he reached out to the Kurds in the north and suggested he was prepared to defect or surrender and was immediately put under lock and key. Finally, Britt, just before the hostilities began, Saddam Hussein made it known that he was dividing his country into 4 parts. Since that happened on Monday of this week, officials are saying that the 4 different regions of the Iraqi nation have not been communicating with one another. There has been some unit-to-unit communications, but the absence of communication to the top suggests that perhaps the decapitation is much further along than the Iraqis would like. Brett.
Carl Cameron, thanks very much. U.S. Marines captured the Iraqi port city of Qasr today, while other troops seized 2 airfields in the Iraqi desert, 140 and 180 miles west of Baghdad, part of a move to encircle the Iraqi capital. Fox News correspondent Rick Leventhal is with the Marines' 1st Division 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion and filed this report.
We're in southern Iraq. We can hear jets flying overhead, and behind us you can see a wide range of military vehicles. A lot of Marines out here and Army as well, and in the distance you see some heavy artillery out there. They have been busy. There was a lot of shelling going on overnight and again this morning before dawn. Constant shelling from south of the Iraq-Kuwaiti border here into southern Iraq, and it is believed that forces that were here have been driven out. We want to show you some tape also that we shot yesterday. Is believed to be the first engagement on the ground of enemy by Marines against Iraqi forces. We were out with an LAV-25. It was a security mission. The captain on board our LAV spotted enemy in a border post. He told the gunner to go ahead and engage, and the gunner opened fire. Here's what it sounded like. He fired 15 rounds and destroyed the guard post, as you can see from these pictures. When we got there, the Marines noticed there was a flag on top of a flagpole, an Iraqi flag, and they wanted it. So first Sergeant Timmons climbed up the pole. He couldn't get all the way to the top, so then they took the LAV and actually flattened the pole and grabbed the flag to keep as a souvenir. And if you want to see how dirty these guys get out here, take a look at these gentlemen. PFC, just turn around one time and let's just see the back of your vest here. Look at that. That's just from riding around in this dust. And last night, you know, we had a couple incoming artillery go over our heads. One of them almost hit you, you told me.
Yes, sir. We were out coming here and hit pretty close to the vehicle. We felt the vehicle rock, vehicle shake. Me and Lance Corporal Basilio were in the back. And luckily, we didn't get hit.
Actually rose up off the ground?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Right. And give us your full name.
I'm PFC Anthony Cobb.
And you want to say hi to anybody?
I want to say hi to my wife, hi to my mom, and hi to my son.
Yeah, I know these guys are working hard out here. You want to say a quick hello?
Yes, I want to say hello to my baby girl, Maria, my mom, my 2 younger brothers. Hey, I'll be home soon. Don't worry.
Yeah, let's hope we all get home soon and safe. With the 3rd LAR in southern Iraq, I'm Rick Leventhal, Fox News.
That Marine CH-46 Sea Knight helicopter carrying 8 British and 4 American troops crashed near the Iraqi-Kuwait border last night, killing all on board. There were no indications that it had come under hostile fire, though. Fox News correspondent Oliver North, Fox News contributor Oliver North was an eyewitness to that crash and reports from Kuwait what he saw and what his producer Griff Jenkins saw.
The aircraft went down in very dramatic fashion. There is no doubt that there is no one left alive, and mercifully no one suffered, certainly not for any length of time. It was very, very, just like an airplane crash often is, it was very, very direct and very immediate. It was the middle of the night, and it was under very adverse weather conditions. In fact, the actual portion of the mission that we were on turned around because of the weather. The weather was terrible. And of course, this is a war, and you go beyond your normal operating, if you will, parameters under these kinds of conditions. And there are any number of causes for this, and I don't want to speculate as to what it might have been. It could be anything from a mechanical problem to something else, and it is under investigation. There are accident investigators on the scene. It is just inside the Iraqi border, or excuse me, just inside the Kuwaiti border with Iraq, where the crash occurred. And I think we'd be best off not to speculate as to what happened, but allow that investigation to go forward. And as I said, both Griff Jenkins and I have given our tapes of what we saw aboard our aircraft, 1 and 2 aboard that flight, to the accident investigators to assist them in that effort.
As the American military marches through the Iraq desert toward Baghdad, Kuwaitis are watching Iraqi oil fields go up in flames as Iraq tries to deny the U.S. the use of its oil. And for the first time in many years, the Iraqis are celebrating liberation from Saddam Hussein. Fox News correspondent William Lajeunesse is in Kuwait City and joins us live with more. William?
Well, Britt, as Secretary Rumsfeld said, this war is about many things: weapons of mass destruction, also terrorism, but also liberation. And today, the town of Safwan became the first Iraqi village that has been freed from the Saddam Hussein's 30 years of oppression. Now, ironically, Safwan was the site where General Norman Schwarzkopf ended the first Gulf War, signing a ceasefire accord, and where this war began, not in the air, but on the ground. Early today, U.S. tanks and troops secured Safwan. Townspeople greeted coalition soldiers with cheers and handshakes, yelling slogans like, "Saddam, your days are numbered," tearing down posters of the man who stole their freedom. Now, this is a scene we expect to see of more in the coming weeks as coalition forces continue moving city by city, including late today the port of Qasr. The Brits tonight say they hope to secure Basra without necessarily entering the city. So far, many Iraqis have chosen not to fight, hundreds surrendering, even more reportedly deserting their posts, some even leaving their tanks with the engines running. Now, some Iraqi soldiers have appeared with white flags, telling American forces, quote, "Our officers are not fighting, why should we? This is a technological war, we can't win." Now, in Kuwait today, 3 missile alerts. 1 missile never made it. The 2 that did were intercepted. That makes 6 Iraqi missiles intercepted by Patriots in the last 48 hours, saving hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. At least 2 of those missiles confirmed Scuds, a missile Iraq insists it did not have and violates UN resolutions. Why is this important? It demonstrates that despite aggressive targeting by U.S. fighters and a priority of special forces, Iraq's missile capacity and mobile launchers remain a significant threat. UN inspectors believe that Iraq could have as many as 60 long-range Scuds, 11 launchers, 120 warheads, 25 with anthrax and botulinum. Now, this is a big concern because the man in charge of the southern Iraqi forces facing U.S. soldiers is Ali Hassan al-Majid, Chemical Ali, one of the dirty dozen and perhaps the most wanted men after Saddam and his 2 sons. Ali Majid gassed the Kurds. He killed more than 5,000 at Halabja of innocent men, women, and children. Also, he is known for the man who put down the brutal repression of the Shiites in '91 and also gassed Iranian soldiers in that long war with Iraq. But the bottom line is, Britt, that U.S. men and women here putting their lives on the line for our freedom and that of the Iraqi people, and the liberation has indeed begun. Britt?
William Lajeunesse, thank you very much. And once again, you see that live picture from Baghdad where all for the moment is quiet. Should that change, we will go to that right away and keep you posted. As Baghdad's skies erupted with brilliant light and massive explosions today, coalition forces launched similar strikes over the northern Iraqi city of Kirkuk, an oil city that pumps about 900,000 barrels of oil a day of Iraq's total daily oil output. For the latest on those attacks, Chris Klein joins us live from northern Iraq. Chris?
Indeed, Britt, there was equally as fearsome a display of aerial firepower here. For the last several hours, we've seen persistent airstrikes by Allied air power. We're speaking to you now from a forward observation post where we're in the company of about a platoon of Kurdish Special Forces troops, though only about 3 miles away is a rather large Iraqi formation with artillery and armor, as well as heavy mortars. But as I say, we're about 13 miles away from Kirkuk, and at different intervals throughout this evening, we've seen a tremendous amount of aerial firepower, descend on Kirkuk. We've also seen several Iraqi SAMs fired at attacking Allied aircraft. To the best of our knowledge, none of those SAMs were able to intercept the Allied pilots that were making their strikes on Kirkuk. We've seen a great deal of AAA gunfire. Hard to say whether that gunfire has been effective. We are under the impression that a lot of that AAA gunfire is not radar guided, therefore solely basing its aiming on conventional optics, which of course are not terribly useful at night. So difficult to say whether the Iraqi anti-aircraft fire has been effective, but certainly it's been an impressive display of Iraqi firepower, though likely much of it has not reached its target. The bombing has ceased for the time being, and for the time being equally we are no longer seeing AAA gunfire. We can say that earlier in the day when we visited this position in daylight, we came under a brief period of artillery and mortar fire, as I say, from the Iraqi positions nearby. Britt.
Chris Klein in northern Iraq in the city of Kirkuk. Thank you very much. As American forces advance towards southern Iraqi oil fields, hoping to stop sabotage on the part of Saddam's retreating troops, Pentagon officials said Navy SEAL commandos had taken control of 2 Iraqi terminals where oil could be loaded onto tanker ships for export. For more on that whole operation, Fox News correspondent Steve Santani joins us live from Kuwait. Steve, tell us what you were able to witness.
Yeah, well, I can confirm firsthand that, of course, this did take place because we were out there. We rode along with some of the SEALs on their commando raid of these 2 big oil terminals. We went aboard the Valley Forge, which is a cruiser, watched the whole thing in real time in the Combat Control Center on board that cruiser, and then went in one of the SEALs' ribs, which is a rigid hull inflatable boat, all the way out to this terminal a couple hours after it had been secured. So what they did, they drove their boats up to the edge of this long terminal. They're each about a mile long, and they took 2 of them last night, the 2 main shipping terminals for Iraq's oil, for the Food for Oil program. And they put their boats right up next to the ladders. They stormed onto these structures, these big structures, went on and secured it with their guns, made sure nobody was threatening them. They cleared the area. They found some people on there. There were 23 people on board the biggest one, the main one. There were 18 people aboard the other, and they took them captives, and they're being questioned now. They also found some explosives. This would indicate somebody was planning to do some damage out there, and this is the reason the SEALs moved in and took this action. They wanted to prevent an environmental catastrophe and an economic catastrophe, because had Saddam Hussein turned the valves open on these oil terminals, which is the terminal of a big pipeline that comes from onshore, goes under the water for 22 miles and out to these terminals, well then it would have been an environmental disaster, a huge oil spill. Had he blown it up, which there's some evidence they might have been planning to do, that would have been a disaster. Had it been destroyed, it would damage Iraq's economic future. So the SEALs made their move just in time. The operation went practically flawlessly, and now those 2 big oil terminals south of the Iraqi coast are in American hands. Britt?
Steve Santani, thank you very much. Let's pause now and talk to retired Air Force Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, who is with us in our Fox News War Briefing Room, about the current set of operations, what their objectives may be, what kind of terrain the ground forces are likely to cover, what the objectives of the air campaign may be. General McInerney, give us a sense, if you can, and use that screenwriter device, if you can, to frame for us a picture of this operation as it is now unfolding.
Okay, Britt, I'll go to it in a second, but you know, we've had the most publicized coverage of any war in history, and it's been in snippets, and hopefully now let's jump to the screenwriter and I can bring it all together for you. A lot happened. We've got a number of different battles going on. Down here in the south, we've got the 1st Marine Amphibious Force and the 1st Armored Division UK that is operating down here against the 51st Division in the Basra area. We have up here the 3rd Armored Division, 3rd Infantry Division. Everybody watched it last night, sitting behind that command post vehicle and racing across that territory. Very impressive. what they're doing in over 100 miles. But some of the things we're not seeing, for instance, the Joint Star that has been covering this force, and this Joint Star has been flying up and down, covering the force going up as it is on the west side of the Euphrates River, which is a marvelous obstacle to use for protection. In addition,
General, is that line that you've drawn down right down the spine of the rock there?
The blue line
that's
right
the
down
river,
the spine.
right?
That's the Euphrates River.
Right now, you mentioned that we were able to see some of the advance that was made by those forces last night. What they did, 100 miles?
They said they did 100 miles.
And we were seeing that on Fox News because we had a camera on one of those armored vehicles, and we saw it rolling up north for much of the night, completely unopposed.
Absolutely.
I gather that area out there on that side of the river, General, is sparsely populated and lightly defended. Am I correct?
Yes, and you saw it all last night. There's nothing out there, and that's why this campaign is brilliant. It doesn't involve any collateral damage, no villages, no urban warfare, all the way from where the division moved from back here all the way up to here. And I suspect they're right up here a little further than 100 miles right now, Britt. There's something else, though. This Global Hawk up here has also been protecting him. And this Global Hawk has been flying around up here, all over here, bringing in this reconnaissance and feeding it in with the Joint Stars. And then they're sending that information to the division commander so he knows his flank is screened, much like Patton had during World War II when he raced across France. The other thing, though, is we've got the B-2s that have been flying coverage. In case anything came up, or fighters, this coverage is there to attack anything that would try to attack that 3rd Division.
Right, now, as they advance, General, up that west side of the Euphrates River,
right.
Sooner or later they're going to get up toward Baghdad. That's on the other side of the river. What are they looking for? What are they looking to encounter up there? And where might the strongest resistance come?
Let me show you. I'll blow this map up, and here's what they're going to look at. This is extremely important. This is the Hammurabi division that you've got right here. This is Nebuchadnezzar division.
Now these are Republican. These are Republican Guard divisions. These are well-trained forces. This is serious potential opposition. Correct?
Yeah, these are the 2 best Republican Guard divisions, armed with T-72 tanks and the best they've got to offer.
Now, are they based there, or are they simply garrisoned there for the moment?
They garrisoned here. They moved from over here. Well, I won't do it, but they moved in there because they know that this is a key access route. And so the real battle is going to be right in this area, Britt. And
what's that area called?
This is the Karbala Gap, right in here. This area right here is the Karbala Gap, and our forces are going to try to go right up through here and blow this division out, and then you're going to see probably the 101st come around and blow the Nebuchadnezzar division out.
Now that will bring us to the outskirts of Baghdad. Now let me ask you this, General, will they have to fight their way on the ground past those 2 Republican Guard bases there, or will they be able to get air support, and will this be able to be done from the air?
They could do it themselves, but the fact is I threw in 2 B-2s. You saw what shock and awe was. Well, you can imagine if you have a force of B-2s, those divisions can't move because that Joint Stars will see them. If the Joint Stars sees them, then we target them. So they're staying in a fixed position. And with the Global Hawk, the Joint Stars that can also get targets that aren't moving, as well as the infrared from the Predator and that, all these sources are being fed to the bombers, and then they have the opportunity to destroy them and destroy those divisions. That's what's going on right now. Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar are, to me, the 2 primary things standing in the way. And I think that decision is going to be decided in another 6 to 8 hours.
As to when and how to hit them?
Precisely. And they're probably negotiating with them. Remember Secretary Rumsfeld was talking about they were talking to divisions outside. He knows they are at the Karbala Gap there. And so they're going to get a decision here pretty quick, and hopefully they'll do what I understand the 51st Division has done down in Basra. There's initial reports that it is capitulating.
Now, the 51st Division you're talking about, Dan, that's a regular Army division of the Iraqi Army, and it's that regular Army division, not the more elite Republican Guard, that is defending the city of Basra down to the south, right?
That's correct, and the Republican Guards are a little harder, but I think they know their choice. It's all over, Brett, and we don't want to destroy them. Clearly, the signal is out. We need you to help build a democracy in this new
Even the
Iraq.
Republican Guard that's been so loyal to Saddam Hussein, it was thought to have been a terrible mistake not to destroy them the last time around.
Well, it may have been, but you remember a year ago in February 02, 14th, Saddam killed 10 generals in the Republican Guards led by a lieutenant general. So, look, not everything is happy with Saddam. Most of the people are happy to see him go, and that's what's going on right now. So I think that's the key decisions. If those two divisions elect to fight, then you'll see air power and a combination of ground power destroy them. We could easily destroy them with the ground forces, but we'll accept casualties. From the air, look, we haven't lost one airplane. We haven't had them fly one airplane yet, launch an airplane yet. We haven't had any SAMs that I know of, and they fired about 10 Scuds. So we are in control. There is still a lot of fight left to go, but I'd much rather have our cards than have their cards, Britt.
General McInerney, thank you very much. In Doha, Qatar, the base for Central Command, the plans for the liberation of Iraq continue tonight, and Fox News correspondent Mike Tobin is live from Camp Asaliha and joins us now. Mike?
Well, Britt, General Franks, the commander of troops in the region, spent his day in a series of meetings, a series of briefings. His top generals also spent their days behind closed doors dealing with the sheer volume of information that is coming their way, with the rapid advancements of troops, with the historic day that we have now seen of shock and awe. General Franks also sent a message out to the troops, telling them that their objective is clear: to disarm Iraq. The objective is clear: to liberate the people from an oppressive dictator who practiced murder and torture and hunger as means of oppression. Let me show you another segment from the message that General Franks sent out to the troops. He's told them that you are now in harm's way. Our task will not be easy, but we're fighting for a just cause, and the outcome is not in doubt. I am proud of you, he said, all that you have done and all that you will achieve in the days ahead. We can also show you video from the Al-Faw Peninsula, which has been captured by coalition forces. It's a key element there because the Royal Marines were able to secure the oil terminals on the Al-Faw Peninsula, preventing another letting of oil or dumping of oil into the Persian Gulf and another environmental disaster. U.S. Navy SEALs captured a terminal out at sea, accomplishing the same task. Another key objective that was captured was Qasr, a key element because that is a port city where humanitarian aid ships could dock, bringing aid into the people of Iraq. One hitch in that plan is the fact that vessels have been intercepted at sea, Iraqi vessels carrying sea-based mines. So you now have the Royal Mine Countermeasure ships from the British Navy out sweeping the area for mines, trying to make sure that the entrance and exits to that port are clear so they can get these humanitarian aid vessels in, get the aid to the people, show them that the coalition forces aren't such a bad bunch of guys, that they intend to make good on the promises that were in the leaflets, that were in the radio broadcast, therefore encourage a bunch of surrenders. Brett, back to you.
All right, thanks very much, Mike Tobin. As this heavy bombardment, part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, pounded the Iraqi capital today, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Gaza City to protest the U.S.-led war, chanting, quote, "America is the mother of terrorism," and, quote, "with our soul and blood we shall redeem you, Saddam." For more on those protests and several more throughout Europe, Fox News correspondent Todd Connor joins us now live from Amman, Jordan. Todd?
Hi there, Britt. Well, though the U.S. and its allies say they're trying to liberate the Iraqis, they're having a hard time convincing the Arab people in this region that this is really the way to go about it. Right here in Amman, Jordan, and in other cities in the region, demonstrations turning violent and in some cases even turning deadly. An estimated 10,000 protesters shouting anti-war slogans fought with police in the middle of Amman's second largest Palestinian refugee camp. Security forces eventually used tear gas and batons to turn away the protesters. Jordan's King Abdullah later appealing for calm. Another 10,000 people started protesting after Friday prayers in Cairo, Egypt. A cleric called for a jihad or holy war to support the Iraqi people. Demonstrators threw rocks and pretty much anything else they could get their hands on at police. Police then eventually turning on the water cannons in order to try and beat back the crowd. In the West Bank and Gaza, a call for suicide attacks on U.S. and British troops. Thousands of Palestinians turning out to protest the attack on Iraq and urge Saddam to fire Scuds at Israel. In the past, Saddam has given tens of thousands of dollars to the families of Palestinian suicide bombers. And in Paris last night, demonstrators taking up the government's anti-war cry. An estimated 20,000 people marching to the heavily guarded U.S. embassy, which was closed for the day for security reasons. Many of them calling President Bush and Prime Minister Blair killers. And in Rome, tens of thousands of protesters also marching toward the U.S. embassy, some shooting flares and fireworks and burning flags. And things turned deadly, though. In Yemen, 2 people were killed, a policeman and an 11-year-old boy during protests there. And certainly not to make light of the situation, Britt, but even the astrologers are getting into the game here. I was reading my horoscope in the Jordan Times today, and it said, quote, "You'll have the right words to help the combatants find peace. Go where you can to do the most good, and wear your flak jacket." Britt?
Well, you better put that jacket on, Todd. Thanks very much. Coming up next, wait till you hear what a couple of TV networks did to President Bush. We'll also be keeping a close eye on Baghdad. Stay tuned. And now the most telling 2 minutes in television, the latest from the wartime grapevine. The BBC is apologizing profusely for broadcasting 1 minute and 37 seconds of President Bush as he was having his hair combed and by one account squirming in his chair before his Oval Office speech Wednesday night. CBS News, whose crew was responsible for pool coverage used by all networks, said a technician accidentally flipped a switch that fed the images out. No major U.S. network used the feed, but the BBC fed it out all over the world. CBS says it's sorry. The BBC says it's sorry. The White House says there have been such incidents in the past and wants control of the switch in the future. The movie maker, Oscar nominee, and left-wing activist Michael Moore said worries over war in Iraq won't keep him from the Academy Awards ceremony on Sunday. He said, quote, "You can't have anything more American than the Oscars. That's why our boys are fighting and dying." Meanwhile, the New York Times reports that the war has triggered a wave of nostalgia for Bill Clinton out there in California. Around water coolers in the Golden State, the Times reports, people are saying that Mr. Clinton, quote, "would never have allowed a war to play havoc with Oscar night, one of the state's most hallowed traditions." U.S. troops given the job of liberating Iraq have raised the stars and stripes in some places they've gained control of. The Pentagon is not encouraging the practice, however, and Sky News reports that British forces have been forbidden by order of their military commanders from raising their own flag on the grounds that the hoisting of the Union Jack might smack of occupation and conquest, not liberation and freedom. And finally, in this time of shock and awe, all sorts of reports are coming from Arab newspapers. Al-Qabas, a Kuwaiti newspaper, is reporting that one of Saddam Hussein's Qusay was killed during the so-called decapitation strike Wednesday night. The Washington Times, however, says intelligence reports indicate it was Saddam's other son, Uday, who was killed. Uday, according to a London-based Saudi daily newspaper, had been placed under house arrest to avoid his leaking important information. A translation of the report in Al-Sharq al-Awsat newspaper says Uday, quote, "talks too much and drinks alcohol daily." The FBI is intensifying its interviews with Iraqi-born people living in America, and FBI Director Robert Mueller said the Bureau, in conjunction with police departments nationwide, is redoubling its anti-terrorism efforts now that war with Iraq is underway. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials continue to pursue a Saudi man they believe may be planning terrorist attacks. Fox News correspondent Carolyn Shively has the latest on that.
Federal investigators are now looking at a possible connection between a missing Saudi national and Jose Padilla, the American accused of plotting a dirty bomb attack. The FBI put a be on the lookout alert for Adnan el-Shukri Juma Thursday. Officials warned he is working with al-Qaeda and could be plotting terror attacks against the U.S. El-Shukri Juma was last seen in the Miami area, and federal agents have been searching for him in Miramar, Florida, interviewing his friends and neighbors. Padilla was one of those neighbors before his arrest last May. He is now in federal custody, listed as an enemy combatant. Federal agents say they discovered the importance of el-Shukri Juma through documents they found in the capture of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the accused mastermind of the September 11th attacks. Padilla is thought to have met with Mohammed early last year. Federal agents have also conducted a 72-hour blitz of arrests in Operation Green Quest, the campaign to shut down terrorist financing. Officials say Los Angeles, New York, Minneapolis, Newark, and Detroit were all homes for illegal financial schemes that are most susceptible to exploitation by terrorists. In addition to shutting down the money, authorities are beefing up security, hoping to prevent any future terrorist attacks. Police at the U.S. Capitol building aren't allowing any more general public tours for now.
I understand if there's a security threat that it has to be managed, so we kind of accept these things.
Even March Madness is feeling the security pinch. Boston police have increased their patrols at the first round of the NCAA tournament.
The nation's paying good attention, and I think everybody will be diligent about it, and the crowd will be very cooperative. I think it'll be fine.
The FBI has issued its first international alert for a woman in the hunt for al-Qaeda. Agents believe Aifa Siddiqui may have information about possible sleeper cells in the U.S. as well as senior al-Qaeda operatives. They believe she is in Pakistan. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
Today's air barrage over the Iraqi skies came with U.S. ground troops already a third of the way to Baghdad. And when it comes to gaining territorial control of Iraq, coalition's forces placed an emphasis on the west and in Basra in the south. So what's the significance of those places? For answers, return to retired Special Forces Operations Officer and Fox News contributor Lieutenant Colonel Tim Eads. Tim, what can you tell us about, first of all, the operation around Basra, where we had been hearing that our forces had been kind of bogged down there, encountering resistance, it not going so well. What's the latest?
Right, Britt, they were up against the 51st Division, as General McInerney was talking about. The reports are now that the division commander has surrendered along with his executive officer. What that's going to do to us, if I can go to the screenwriter real fast, the mission for Basra was the Marines and along with the Brits. That area there is an oil depot area. It's kind of in a boggy type area, very hard terrain for tanks to traffic in, so you almost have to stick to the roads. If that division has in fact surrendered, what that does, it's going to free up an entire road network that goes basically all the way to main highways that go all the way to Baghdad. So that is potentially a huge deal. The 3rd Infantry Division, as we talked about, is west of the Euphrates River and is just smoking up towards Baghdad. This will give the opportunity for the Marines to engage, perhaps.
Let me stop you for a second on Basra, though, Colonel. Your sense, though, is that if that unit down there, that Iraqi unit down there, has basically given up, then it's basically over down there, right? Basra has fallen.
If Basra will have fallen, if that's the case.
And your information is that the 51st has given up.
Correct.
All right.
That's right.
Now the area out to the west. Now, General McInerney gave us some sense of the importance of those Iraqi units that are going to have to be taken on up near Baghdad, but you're talking about an area farther out to the west, right?
Farther out to the west. This area is critical because there's some oil fields out there, and it will also act as a critical staging area to get our forces up into the northern part of Iraq, which is, again, critical oil country.
Now, General Myers said today, Colonel, that one oil field had been seized out there. One air base had been seized out there. Is that the second one that giving us a total of 2? What's your sense of how well that's all going?
From what I understand, and again, it's confusing in the fog of war, but my understanding is we now have 2 airfields out here of the 3 that are shown on this map. Probably, most definitely, a Special Operations Forces mission. Normally, that is a Ranger unit type mission. Seize that airfield and control it. And then what they'll do is they'll start flowing immediately logistics and use those airfields as a staging base.
Can you show us again where they are on the map there?
Sure. They're right here, this area right here where the helicopter is.
And of course, that's also the area where they fear that there may be Scuds in place, right?
Exactly right. Special Operations have been operating in this area for well up into a month at least, looking for those Scuds and trying to sit on them in case they would happen to start to erect and launch into Israel.
Does that become a resupply base as well out there?
It will become a resupply base, and it will be critical because of the politics of Turkey, we're not able to send an armored force in through Turkey and control this area up into the north. So we're going to have to send the way it's looking right now, probably the 101st in their helicopters up into that area and secure it. And these air bases will become critical for them to hop up there, almost a hopscotch up there, because this is, roughly 700 miles. That's a little too far for helicopters to get up there.
All right, so those areas secured. What kind of resupply operations would we expect that we'd be able to do out there? One does always worry in a situation like this where it's an invading force about the length of the supply lines. They get a little long, don't they, when you are going, what is it, 400 or 500 miles from the border there all the way up to Baghdad?
Right, and realize that your supply depots are not going to be right up against the border in Kuwait and Iraq. They're going to be further back, Kuwait City and that kind of thing. So you've got quite a distance to go, and you're going to have to rely on C-130s, some helicopters, C-17s.
Big transport C-17,
big
right?
transport C-17 aircraft, and it's going to become a major logistical flying highway to get equipment up there, resupply, that kind of thing. Troops normally carry anywhere from 12 to 72 hours worth of equipment, depending on the combat. The tempo of the combat. If they're in heavy firefights up there, clearly they're going to need a lot more ammunition and water and food, and hopefully they won't need chemical suits and those kind of things, but those things have to be resupplied also. So it's a major logistical effort.
So if we're able to establish bases out there, what do? You put trucks in there, and those trucks, are the roads out there good enough to carry the material in toward those areas where General McInerney described that we're likely to be doing some fighting?
Unfortunately, the road network between these air bases and Mosul and Kirkuk are
that's up in the north, right?
Up in the north are not well developed at all.
So you have to fly stuff.
You basically have to fly stuff. That would be a monster trip in a truck, and then you would have to secure it from the ground and all those other kind of things. So it would be much safer to airlift all this thing up.
But it gives you a place where you can leave the stuff in quantity and move it as you need it.
Exactly right. You can secure it at this air base, bring in your logisticians, your normally rear echelon troops that load airplanes and those kind of things, and then send it forward, which will mean you'll need another base at the other end to accept this thing. So, the operations in Mosul and Kirkuk we need to look at pretty quickly. We need to get the 101st up there to secure those air bases. My guess is that Special Operations Forces are up there right now determining what airfields they're going to take down and when they're going to take them.
Boy, it sure gives you an idea of why war is expensive.
Yes, sir.
Colonel, thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Earlier, we told you about those anti-war protests in the Middle East and Europe, but when the bombs started falling in Baghdad this week, anti-war demonstrators here in America launched their own next phase of attack. Fox News correspondent Claudia Cowan reports on that from San Francisco.
On the streets of San Francisco, another day of demonstrations, another day of arrests.
We're here to facilitate First Amendment rights, but when they jump in the intersection and block traffic, then it's illegal, and we will take action.
Roving bands of protesters made it their mission to paralyze downtown, cordoning off busy intersections with duct tape, blockading businesses, and frustrating innocent drivers. Despite more than 1,400 arrests on Thursday, protesters remained defiant.
A lot of people have joined us yesterday. When I was holding out other signs yesterday, a lot of people just came up to us and said, "We support you." We actually had people getting out of their cars yesterday.
Most were getting out to yell back. According to the latest Gallup poll, 75% of Americans support the liberation of Iraq, and at times, tempers flared.
Oh, are you? You're lucky to be standing on this ground in paradise. You better kiss this ground. People have fought and died for this country so we could be free.
The vocal minority staged protests from Seattle to St. Louis, Los Angeles to Chicago. Most of these protesters are pros. They organize over the internet and fully expect to be arrested. Usually they're cited and released and then return to the demonstration. Even many who oppose the war say they oppose these unruly protests even more, angry that law enforcement resources are being diverted from preventing possible terrorist acts. Here in San Francisco, the extra police are costing $500,000 a day. But with the outbreak of war in Iraq, demonstrations to support our troops are also expected around the United States this weekend. In San Francisco, Claudia Cowan, Fox News.
And now some analytical observations on all this from Fred Barnes, executive editor of the Weekly Standard, Mort Kondracki, executive editor of Roll Call, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer, Fox News contributors all. Well, this was the night when we were told it had begun. It is official. It has begun. Some enormous strikes over Baghdad earlier in the evening. We're keeping a close eye on Baghdad now. You see that things remain quiet. Let me get from each of you an assessment of how all this is going. Fred?
Well, the bombing of Baghdad is one thing, and it's going very well, of course, but go back and look what happened. Starting on Wednesday night, the bombing of the bunker where Saddam either was or he wasn't. Ever since then, the command structure of the Iraqis has been paralyzed, so that was good. Now, jump to today, the last 24 hours, you have the third, I guess it's the 3rd Infantry Division, and that's what roaring up to Baghdad. It's reminiscent of after the breakout in France after D-Day in 1944, Patton and his tanks racing across the north of France. Thrilling. Then you have the troops out in the west, where the Scud zone. They're taking over the airfields there. As we just heard, they're about to grab Basra. Kirkuk is about to fall in the north. All in all, very good.
So far, so good.
Yeah, I agree with all that. In addition to which, Rumsfeld said today that obviously what we've done so far was not sufficient to completely crack the regime. So the bombing persists today. But look at the sort of the ancillary evidence of what hasn't happened. There aren't any bridges that have been blown. There's little in the way of new oil field fires. There's very little resistance. There's no more Scud attacks anywhere. There aren't any use of chemical and biological weapons. I mean, all the things that you would have anticipated a ruthless, in control Saddam Hussein would have ordered his troops to do, he hasn't done. Now, maybe what he's doing is depending on turning Baghdad into Stalingrad, but if his command and control is destroyed from the air, as we're trying to do, there may not be a fight for Baghdad.
Charles, what's your sense of it?
Militarily, except for some more resistance in the south than we would have expected, we thought the Iraqi army would simply lay down and roll over completely. I think it's going rather well. I think the real issue now is sort of the political issue. What's the effect of what we're seeing on television in the Arab world and elsewhere? The bombing, I think, today was quite unbelievable and dramatic, and you wonder, it's going to have a positive effect if it's seen, for example, in Pyongyang. If the Koreans look at this and say, this is what the Americans can do. It's an unbelievable demonstration of power and precision. On the other hand, you can imagine Al Jazeera is going to show this, and it looks on the tube as if it's Dresden, as if it's flattening a city. Of course, all of us know that.
Yeah, you heard Secretary Rumsfeld, who heard some commentary along those lines on the air before his briefing today, and came in and spent some time in the briefing to refute that notion.
Well, exactly. I mean, the lights are on, the water is flowing, electricity is going. It's an unbelievably precise attack that leaves the infrastructure intact. It's obviously an attack on command and control, but that's not how it'll be shown. So I think politically, we're doing reasonably well, but unless we're able to wrap it up shortly, I think it's going to be hard for us.
Charles, let me mention one other thing here. We have a dispatch now from Turkey. Quote, this is a Reuters dispatch. A Turkish commando force of about 1,500 men crossed into northern Iraq on Friday night, a precursor to an eventual larger deployment, Turkish officials told the Reuters news agency. The U.S., of course, has told Turkey that it would not welcome this. This is one of the complicating factors that had been worried about. And, of course, it took us until late today before we finally got the overflight permission that we had been seeking from the Turks, which thought had been granted yesterday, and finally came only late today after further complications.
This is a deeply serious problem. We've known that the Turks and the Kurds don't mix, and we've tried to make sure that the Turks stay out. They attempted to bribe us and say, we'll only give you the rights to overfly in return for your permission to go into northern Iraq. And we said no. Apparently, they've allowed us, nonetheless, the overflight.
Right.
But the problem is that I think once they're in there, we're not going to be able to dislodge them.
All right.
Now, one of the questions is how far in they go. If they just go in a few miles, that's one thing. That's probably not their intent, however. If they go in farther than that...
and of course, this looks like a commando force that would be an advanced party.
Well, and if it's a large-scale movement, then that's really serious. And you could have a second war going on between the Kurds and the Turks when the Kurds are supposed to be helping us capture Iraqi territory.
And now we understand in retrospect why the Turks would not allow ground troops of the United States, because had we been there in place, we wouldn't have allowed this. This gives them a free hand, and it's going to be a really serious problem. It's a way of Turkey exerting pressure, diplomatic and political, and it'll be military, on the Kurds. And we may have a second front after the war. Not active, but it's going to be a very dangerous political front.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for being here. Talk to you later this evening. That's a special report for this time. Join us again next time. But in the meantime, stay tuned for my colleague Shepard Smith in New York, and continue to stay with Fox News from the latest on the war and other news, fair, balanced, and unafraid. I'll be back with Shep at 8 o'clock. Stay tuned.
The shock and awe phase of the war to liberate Iraq is now underway. The massive bombardment of Baghdad and other cities across the country, the top story, as Fox reports tonight. The Pentagon told us we'd know when shock and awe began, and we did. Right around 1 o'clock this afternoon in Washington, 9 o'clock this evening, Saddam time, a series of enormous explosions rocking Baghdad. As one commander aboard the aircraft carrier USS Lincoln put it, tonight Saddam is reaping what he has sown. From the sea, our ships and subs firing Tomahawk missiles, 320 of them, 3 times the total number in the last Gulf War. From the skies, our bombers unloading massive 2,000-pounders. Saddam's main presidential palace, a key target. His extravagant surroundings, the ornate tribute to his rule, reduced for the most part to this pile of rubble. Piles of concrete and dust. His government buildings destroyed, one devastating blast after another. And the Iraqi soldiers waving white flags all over southern Iraq as our ground troops advance at a record clip toward Baghdad. Enemy troops surrendering by the hundreds, say our generals, advising Iraqi soldiers that this is their best option.
I urge you in the strongest possible terms, do the honorable thing, stop fighting, that you may live to enjoy a free Iraq where you and your children can grow and prosper.
And as for the Allied forces, General Myers urging them to take pride in their mission and to rest assured the outcome is not in doubt. As for Saddam Hussein, has the end already come? On Top Story duty tonight, the national security correspondent Brett Baer live at the Pentagon. Brett?
Shep, it's not over. In fact, we're told it's just the beginning. The first day of the air campaign inside Iraq, and Fox News has learned that the U.S. has used every strike aircraft in its arsenal. And the word is that Operation Iraqi Freedom is having a significant effect inside Iraq. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld said today that the Iraqi leadership is losing grip of its country. And as for Saddam, his fate is unclear, but what is clear is that the control is crumbling. According to one senior defense official, tonight, if any command and control is left in Baghdad by tomorrow, they will be completely out of touch with their forces. The 90-minute initial barrage with more than 1,200 bombs and missiles hit a host of targets, including 3 of Saddam Hussein's palaces, Ba'ath Party headquarters, and Republican Guard troop positions. And most importantly, according to defense officials here, targets called weapons of mass destruction sites. Now, carrier-based attack aircraft struck targets in northern Iraq, the cities of Mosul, Kirkuk, and Tikrit, while more than 600 Tomahawk cruise missiles and bombs dropped from B-2 stealth bombers, B-52s, B-1s handled Baghdad.
We did not choose this war. Saddam Hussein was given a choice by the international community. Give up your weapons of mass murder or lose power. He chose unwisely, and now he will lose both.
The march to Baghdad continues tonight from every angle. In a few days, according to senior defense officials, coalition troops will have surrounded Baghdad, and they say so far the resistance has been fairly light, but still present.
Moving towards our objectives, but we must not get too comfortable. We're basically on our plan and moving towards Baghdad, but there are still many unknowns out there.
You're looking now at exclusive video. This is video of a CH-46 helicopter. This was actually one of the helicopters that went down yesterday. 4 U.S. Marines were killed, 8 British Marines killed. That yesterday. Today we can report 2 more U.S. servicemen have died. A U.S. Marine was killed while trying to take a southern Iraqi port city. Another killed trying to secure an oil field in the south. Tonight we can report that surrenders are continuing at this hour at mass levels, according to one official. They are happening so fast we can't handle them all. Shep?
Brett Baer, live at the Pentagon. Tonight, the largest precision bombing campaign in world history. On the ground in Baghdad as shock and awe begins.
That's the first one I've actually seen.
Northern Iraq, bombardments reported in the city of Mosul and the oil town of Kirkuk. Iraq fires again on Kuwait, the Scud targeted by a Patriot. The march for Baghdad, coalition forces breaking records, moving more than 100 miles in country. Iraqis surrendering, says the Pentagon, as fast as they can handle them. He was the early target. Did he survive? The news as Fox reports right now.
Live from the world headquarters of Fox News in New York, this is the Fox Report with Shepard Smith. Fair news, balanced news, now.
Bombs all over Iraq. Crucial towns across the nation targeted, including the northern cities of Mosul and Kirkuk. They're important for their enormous oil fields and their airstrips. They were pummeled today. Sustained explosions, flashes of light, and anti-aircraft fire filling the night sky. Those cities near the border with Turkey. Today, an okay from the Turks for the use of their airspace. And a warning that Turkish troops will go to northern Iraq, and widespread reports about the Iraqi leader and whether the butcher of Baghdad is alive to surrender. We have Team Fox coverage with America at War. Jim Engel live at the White House. Mike Tobin live at Central Command in Qatar. First, Chris Klein live tonight in northern Iraq. Chris.
Shepard, it's only within the last 45 minutes or so that intense aerial bombardment over Mosul and Kirkuk from our vantage point has ceased. We can say the same of the equally intense anti-aircraft fire that we witnessed, as well as several salvos of Iraqi SAMs. We can't be certain if any of those salvos by Iraqi anti-aircraft missiles were successful in downing Allied aircraft. We certainly hope that they were not. We also can't be certain whether the intense automatic cannon fire that of the AAA batteries on the Iraqi side also had any impact. It has been an absolutely fearsome display of Allied aerial firepower, which could be best described as a constant pulse of burning light, as if one were looking at the center of a volcano or the center of a furnace where the molten metal is burning at its brightest. Something that we've also noticed in the course of the last half an hour or so, given the power plant in Kirkuk, the lights of Kirkuk seem to have essentially faded away. We can't see them, and where we are here in a forward Kurdish Special Forces observation post, we're only some 13 miles from Kirkuk, and indeed only 3 miles from some heavily armed Iraqi formations with armor and artillery. Indeed, we came under fire today, but we can't see the lights of Kirkuk. Perhaps Allied air power has not only knocked out the armored formations and anti-aircraft batteries, but also succeeded in destroying vital pieces of Iraqi infrastructure there. Shepard.
Chris Klein live with the night scope in northern Iraq. We'll get back to him as events warrant. And in the meantime, in addition to the unprecedented access we're getting to the battlefields, we're also getting an insider's look at what it takes to stage a war. These are newly released pictures of the British Royal Air Force Command Air Operations Center. So top secret, they won't tell us where it is, other than somewhere in the Gulf region. From here, they coordinate all that happens in the arena. Every operation, from land, sea, and air, monitored at every moment, using technology barely imaginable just 12 years ago, at the start of the first Gulf War. Our Team Fox coverage continues with America at War. Mike Tobin live tonight at Central Command in the Gulf nation of Qatar. Mike?
And Shepard, General Tommy Franks has remained behind closed doors as he has since the start of this campaign, attempting to digest all of that information that comes in from land, sea, and air as coalition forces make such a rapid advancement through Iraq. He has sent a message out to the troops telling them that their objective is to disarm Iraq, to liberate the people from an oppressive dictator. Let me show you a little segment of the message that he sent out to the troops, telling them, you are now in harm's way. Our task will not be easy, but we're fighting for a just cause, and the outcome is not in doubt. I am proud of you and all that you have done and all that you will achieve in the days ahead. Two key objectives have been seized, and we have video of that, the Al-Faw Peninsula and Qasr. The Al-Faw Peninsula is significant because there are oil terminals there. Royal Marines have secured the oil terminals, preventing oil from being dumped into the Persian Gulf. U.S. Navy SEALs secured an oil terminal offshore, preventing the same. Qasr is key because it has a seaport there, opening the doors to allow humanitarian aid ships to come in there. There's a hitch in that, though. They believe there is the possibility that sea mines are in the facility. So you have the Royal Navy with their mine countermeasure vessels in the area, trying to make sure the coast is clear, if you will, that the waterways are clear to allow the humanitarian aid ships in there, let the aid get to the people, show the Iraqi people that the coalition forces aren't such bad guys, that they were telling the truth in those leaflets and radio broadcasts that were pumped into the south of Iraq. Encourage more surrenders. Shepard?
Mike Tobin live in the Qatari desert. Now the commander-in-chief meeting with his war council today and briefing congressional leaders on the developments in Operation Iraqi Freedom. President Bush saying we're making progress in the liberation of Iraq and will stay in that country until the job is done and not a moment longer. The president also with a message for the troops risking their lives for our freedom, saying they have the thanks of a grateful nation.
All of us involved here in Washington are extremely proud of the skill and bravery of our young Americans who are willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves.
Well, the president then off to Camp David with some of his war council in tow. The rest will confer with the commander-in-chief through satellite video links throughout the weekend. Fox Report now from the senior White House correspondent Jim Engel on duty tonight on the North Lawn. Jim?
Hello, Shep. Well, top administration officials declined to bury Saddam Hussein today, saying they just don't know his fate, in spite of some indications that he is no longer in control.
I hear scraps of information, and you can be certain if I had a sufficient number of scraps that it began to make a persuasive case that I would opine on it.
Now, some Pentagon officials believe Hussein was at least seriously wounded late Wednesday when American forces attacked a location where he and his sons were thought to be spending the night. Iraqi TV showed Hussein twice the next day and released another tape today, but no one accepts videotaped appearances as proof of anything.
The fact that Iraq released a tape doesn't tell anybody anything about where Saddam Hussein is or is not.
Now, the president meets often with top advisors who are getting a lot of intelligence about Hussein, some based on contacts with the Iraqi military. But one official says some reports indicate Hussein is alive, others that he's dead, and still more that he is seriously wounded. But that no one has anything definitive or conclusive. Everyone has an opinion, an official says, but no one has conclusive proof. Now, the top 5 leaders of Congress came to the White House today, where they sat with the president, the vice president, and the defense secretary and got a classified briefing, an update on the war. Then the president offered reporters a sanitized update.
We're making progress. We will stay on task until we've achieved our objective, which is to rid Iraq of weapons of mass destruction and free the Iraqi people.
Now, there was an interesting glimpse of Mr. Bush's decision-making style today, Shep. The fact is, this decision to shift now to the shock and awe plan, the long-awaited shock and awe plan, was not a decision made by the president himself. Officials say he approved the overall war plan earlier in the week and now leaves the details to military planners. The president believes, Ari Fleischer said, that the best way to win a war is to let the experts run it. Shep.
Jim, what are the experts saying about those first moments? I mean, we now know that they dropped a 2,000-pound bunker buster, some cruise missiles, and all the rest. They believe Saddam who was there. Somebody got medical attention. Who was it?
Well, that's right. There was a call for emergency medical attention, and officials are reasonably certain, says one, that he was in fact still in that location. But they do not know who it was that became a casualty there or how many people. One official says, look, when you drop 10,000 pounds of ordnance, somebody is going to get hurt. They just don't know if one of them was Saddam Hussein. Shep.
Well, we'll wait for that news. Jim Engel live at the White House. It was just after noon here in the east, creeping past 8 p.m. in Baghdad, when the very first suggestion of shock and awe made itself known. White flashes in the skies over Iraq's capital, the pop and crackle of explosions peppering the night air. Then the real blasting began. It soon became clear that the coalition's promised massive air assault campaign had begun indeed. Reporter David Chater of our sister network was in Baghdad for those first moments.
I can't hear the sound of any other explosions apart from the reports of the Akak firing up into the air. We don't know what's up there. We don't know what's out there. Probably nor do the crews that are firing at the moment. Those starbursts are getting a bit closer above me. Again, we're getting the rolling sound. It's continuing. Whatever's there, they're continuing to fire up against it to try and protect the city. You can probably hear, there's the first explosion. I've just seen the first explosion about a mile away. I don't know what it was. It was an explosion, a flash of light. That is the first explosion I've seen to hit the city. So that is definitely something incoming, has landed in the west of the city, directly across the Tigris. I couldn't possibly tell at night how far away it is, but that's the first one I've actually seen. That has just landed amidst the array of lights. There are cars still, amazingly. But that's the first flash of an explosion I've seen across on the western edge of the city.
Those were the very first moments, and then later, as David Chater watched, not 45 minutes later, the full fury of Operation Iraqi Freedom. David describing what was unfolding right before his eyes.
All around the skyline, there's been huge bursts, air bursts, missiles and bombs. It's very difficult to actually watch it and make sure I'm safe. But this is the beginning of shock and awe. It was a dreadful sight. It was very close to us. It's still going on. There's still bursts in the distance. It's now very much moving from the south and the west into the center of the city. I can't see what's happening to the north and the east, but huge amounts of percussions, large explosions, a pall of smoke hanging all around the city at the moment, a lot of fires burning. An extraordinary scene at the moment. It was a bit of a lull, but that's, I think the citizens now of Baghdad know exactly what the Pentagon means by shock and awe. A huge, intense barrage of missiles and bombs aimed at the heart of the city to dislodge, dislocate, and paralyze the command and control structures. I'm getting a lot of interference on this radio. It's very difficult to communicate with you. There's another. Okay, well, those are very large bombs. Those must be the 1,000-pounders, I would have thought. Much, much larger explosions than last time. Huge shock waves coming through the balcony and the open doors where I'm standing. I have no idea if you can hear me. Can you still hear me?
We could certainly hear him and listened for many minutes, still could hear him as the barrage of bombs and missiles rained down on the Iraqi capital. Colossal explosions, buildings ablaze, air raid sirens screaming. We anticipate that there will be more strikes before first light in Baghdad. We'll take you there live for that on night number 3 of America at War and the Iraqi regime said to be folding from within. Iraqi military leaders holding a briefing in Baghdad today, just as the shock and awe campaign got underway. You could even hear the explosions as the Iraqi defense minister was talking. Listen.
الآن قطعات من فوق دافع عن المدينة ومعاها
He was trying to explain that we hadn't taken that southern port city, but we had. The information minister said at the end of the briefing that they defied the bombings by holding that news conference. The massive bombardment visible from northern Kuwait. Huge fireballs seen on the horizon, lighting up the night sky. Witnesses saying they heard the bomber planes flying overhead and saw anti-aircraft fire racing into the night sky. But there's been incoming as well. At least 2 Scuds today, we hear, sent Kuwait's way. Scud Saddam is not supposed to have. Let's get a Fox report now from William Lajeunesse, live outside our newsroom in Kuwait City. William?
Well, Shepard, Scud busters saved Kuwait once again. We had 7 missile alerts on Thursday, 3 today. 1 missile never made it, but the 2 that did were intercepted. That brings to 6 Iraqi missiles that have been intercepted and destroyed by U.S. Patriot missiles in the last 48 hours. Saving hundreds, if not thousands of lives. Now we know that 2, if not 4 of those missiles were indeed Scuds, confirmed. A long-range missile Iraq insists it does not have and violates UN resolutions. This missile intercepted just 3 miles from a heavily populated Kuwait suburb. Why is this important? It demonstrates that despite aggressive targeting by U.S. fighters, priority of special forces, Iraqi missile capacity, and mobile launchers remain a significant threat. UN inspectors believe Iraq may have as many as 50 long-range Scuds, 11 launchers, 120 warheads, some loaded with anthrax and botulinum. The man in charge of Iraq's forces in the south is none other than General Ali Hassan al-Majid, Chemical Ali. One of the dirty dozen and perhaps the most wanted man after Saddam Hussein himself. Why? Chemical Ali, he gassed the Kurds, a brutal repression of Shiites, and also unleashed a chemical attack against the Iranians during the long war with Iraq. Now, as fighting does continue, the liberation has begun. Today, the village of Safwan, the first Iraqi town freed from Saddam Hussein. It was here that General Norman Schwarzkopf had ended the first Gulf War, signing a ceasefire accord, and where this war began, not in the air, but on the ground. Early today, U.S. tanks and troops secured Safwan. Townspeople greeted the coalition soldiers with cheers and handshakes, yelling slogans like "Saddam, your days are numbered," tearing down posters of the man who stole their freedom. This scene we expect to see more of in the coming weeks as coalition forces continue moving north and east, city after city. Late today, the port of Qasr, and tonight, perhaps, we now hear Basra. This is a town that British Marines hoped they would have surrounded, if not taking the city itself. However, Shepard, in the last 45 minutes, we have moved on the wire a story by Reuters that the Iraqi 51st Division, including 200 tanks and 8,000 soldiers, have surrendered. If it is true, that indeed does show that freedom is beginning in Iraq, and as the sun dawns tomorrow, it appears it will be a different country. Shepard?
It certainly does. William Lajeunesse, and the commander of that unit, reported to have surrendered in just the last hour. Now, we'll take you live to the Iraqi desert in just a moment with one of our correspondents traveling with the military in just a moment. But first, Fox News has learned that U.S. and Mexican investigators are searching for 6 Iraqis believed to have toxic material. The suspects are now believed to be in northern Mexico, or, say our sources, they may have slipped into the southwestern United States. Let's get a Fox report now from the chief political correspondent, Carl Cameron, following this one from D.C. Carl?
It's a rapidly developing story, Shep. Fox News has learned that Mexican and U.S. authorities are currently searching for 6 Iraqis, allegedly at large in either the southern U.S. or northern Mexico. Sources say they may have in their possession, quote, toxic materials that require, quote, temperature controls. One Homeland Security official involved with border security told Fox that a toxic chemical that would require temperature control could mean either a biological or even a radiological agent. Sources say the Iraqis wanted to be smuggled into the United States by so-called coyotes, or human smugglers who help illegal aliens enter the U.S. for a price. Officials say the alleged plot was discovered with the help of tips from the public and undercover investigations related to border security and human smuggling. Officials say, though they are treating this information with the utmost seriousness, they have not been able to corroborate the threat, and there are even some officials who are questioning the credibility of the information. Sources say the search has been underway now for 2 days. This entire investigation was supposed to remain secret, and a lot of the details remain classified. Meanwhile, U.S. officials are keeping a very close eye on Iraqis in this country. Authorities say they are about halfway through 11,000 interviews of Iraqis that they plan in this country in the next few days. So far, more than 40 illegal Iraqis have been arrested in cities like Boston, New York, Detroit, and San Diego. And again, Shep, the search continues for 6 Iraqis who may be trying to sneak into the United States, maybe with toxic materials. Shep.
Carl Cameron live for us on Capitol Hill. A Marine from Illinois is one of the dozen crew members killed when the helicopter crashed in Kuwait. 30-year-old Captain Ryan Beaupre piloting that chopper yesterday when it went down about 9 miles from the border with Iraq. His family saying a Marine Corps delegation visited them early this morning. The people of St. Anne immediately sending their sympathies to the family. Captain Beaupre's sister saying the pilot never hesitated when he received his orders to the Middle East.
I asked him if he was scared, and he said, "Honey, I'm sitting on my couch in San Diego. What is there to be scared of?" I don't think he was ever afraid of anything.
Well, the crash killed 4 Americans and 8 British Marines. Still no word on the cause. The Marines say there were no reports of hostile fire in that area. The Pentagon releasing new video of the Air Force testing its biggest non-nuclear bomb. And watch this. It's a bomb which could be used against Iraq. It's officially called the Moab, Massive Ordnance Air Blast, unofficially known as the mother of all bombs. The 21,000-pounder tested recently in Florida. The Pentagon showing off the Moab's power to send a message to Saddam and his troops. No word on how that bomb might be used in combat. This is a live look inside Baghdad. Just about 25 minutes past 3 a.m. The quiet before the shock and awe. Our Team Fox coverage of war will continue, including a trip to the Iraqi desert and the man who went riding through that desert live on Fox News Channel last evening. That's after a quick check on the other big news here at home. That from our newsrooms coast to coast, Fox reports across America. Georgia, people in Mitchell and Worth counties trying to clean up after tornadoes touched down there. Thursday's twisters destroying as many as 75 homes, toppling power lines and knocking down trees. The storms killing 6 and injuring more than 200. The governor declaring a state of emergency in both counties. Washington, the so-called 20th hijacker, now asking that the 4 top captured al-Qaeda members testify at his trial. Zacarias Moussaoui claims they will prove he was not involved in the 9/11 attacks. He's the only one in the United States who's charged in the case. Rhode Island, a judge ruling lawyers and their experts will be allowed to visit the scene of the deadly nightclub fire, giving them the okay next week to inspect the area and to take pictures. The fire killing 99 and injuring about 190 others last month. Washington, NASA had concerns about foam falling off the shuttle's external fuel tank before the Columbia disaster. That, according to newly released documents from the space agency. Specialists looking into the problem during a previous mission, but deciding then there was no threat. Investigators think insulating foam broke off and smashed into the left wing, possibly damaging heat tiles. And that's a Fox Watch. Across America. A lot of firsts last night in the campaign to liberate the people of Iraq. One was this: the military moved 100 miles from the Kuwaiti desert in less than 24 hours. That's a record. And for the first time in the history of warfare, we watched such a trek happen live via brand new technology as the tanks rolled across that desert, through the demilitarized zone and right across Saddam Hussein's sand. Through it all, we were watching with some fancy technology and one of our newer reporters who made a real name for himself, keeping us involved and watching as the brave and the proud wandered into Saddam land. His name's Greg Kelly. He's live in that vehicle with us again tonight. Greg, it's great to see you. Tell us about your recent adventures.
Jeff, it's good to hear your voice. It has been quite an adventure, quite a wild ride through the desert. I think the last time you and I talked, it was shortly after 6 in the morning Kuwaiti time, shortly after 10 p.m. your time last night. That's when we were crossing into the border. We have been on the move constantly ever since, say, for 2 brief fueling stops. on the move through the desert, through all types of terrain. We are deep inside Iraq. We can tell you that. We were hoping that at this point we might be able to tell you our specific location. That is still not on the table right now. For the past several hours, we have been in the dark. We've been doing all we can just to hang on in this formation. We have with us about 74 tanks. And
can I get you to turn your lights off inside and out? All the lights in the vehicle.
Shepard, if you can stay with me right now, we're securing some lights here. We're going into a tactical situation. We have to secure our lights. Can you still hear me, Shep?
I can hear every word you say, Greg. What's happening? What can you tell us?
All right, so you can't see me, but listen.
Keep going.
Well, basically, we had to shut down our lights. We came in here with white lights. That means we came in, all the tanks and the Bradleys came in with their headlights on. We made that decision several hours ago. We were falling somewhat behind schedule, so we decided not to wear our NVGs, our night vision goggles. That was interpreted as a good sign that apparently air superiority was being maintained and our security was likely to be extremely high and assured by other forces. Well, we came in here with our headlights on. Now everyone is securing their lights. So we are going into a tactical, we were in a tactical situation. We are even taking things a little bit more seriously, securing our lights, again, deep inside Iraq. I can tell you this about the journey. Only 4 tanks fell out during this trip from the 2nd Brigade. That is an excellent rate of failure, if you will. 74 tanks, only 4 tanks dropping out. The 2nd Brigade is going to be thrilled with that. We are going to be talking to the troops here shortly. At the last fuel stop several hours ago, morale was high. I can tell you. I'm sorry, are you with me?
Yeah, we're listening, Greg. Go right ahead. Never stop, my friend.
Okay, we got to send it back to you. We got to we got to address some other light issues. We'll be back with you a little bit later, Shep. But all is well. We are deep inside Iraq. We'll send you more when we can.
Greg Kelly, we'll get back to you as news develops, as Fox reports tonight. We are Fox News Channel. This is the Fox Report. At the bottom of the hour, now the top of the war news. President Bush heading to Camp David for the weekend, where he'll meet with members of his war council. He says the coalition is making progress in Iraq, but the White House says he's not watching much of it on television. Hundreds of Saddam's troops are now surrendering to Allied forces. The Pentagon says they're coming as fast as we can handle them. Some Iraqi soldiers even trying to give themselves up to Western journalists. And Iraq firing more missiles at Kuwait, some believed to be Scud missiles. They are banned by the United Nations, and Saddam Hussein claimed he didn't have any. Airstrikes on Baghdad launching the shock and awe phase of the war. 1,000 bombs and more than 300 Tomahawk missiles targeting one of Saddam's palace. At least some of them did. His elite Republican Guard headquarters as well, and other sites key to his regime. And it's certainly not just Baghdad. We're told coalition forces are pounding many cities across the nation. And check out the reaction of ordinary Iraqis to our liberating forces. Smiles and handshakes. And now from our Marines, or some of our soldiers at least, a ripped-down poster, a giant one of Saddam Hussein, an Iraqi man then joining in. Liberation for himself, his family, and his neighbors, beating Saddam's likeness with a shoe. So far, the war is going as scripted. We have Team Fox coverage at the bottom of the hour. Steve Santani in Kuwait with an amazing story to tell. Todd Connor live in Amman, Jordan. First, the national security correspondent Brett Baer at the Pentagon with yeoman's work yet again today. Brett, good evening.
Hey, Shep. Massive surrenders currently ongoing inside Iraq. We can confirm that the leaders of Iraq's 11th Infantry Division and Iraq's 51st Mechanized Division have surrendered. The rest of those divisions have either surrendered or they have just simply left the battlefield, walked off, capitulated. They're not fighting, basically. We can also report about the strikes that we expect to see more strikes as this night continues. Over the past 24 hours that ended at midnight Baghdad time, more than 1,000 Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired. That is 3 times more than were fired in all of Desert Storm. Also, all of the strike aircraft in the U.S. military's arsenal were used in this attack. B-2s flew 34-hour missions from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, and also from Diego Garcia, the island there in the Indian Ocean. They dropped 16 satellite-guided bombs each on Baghdad. B-52s flew 16-hour missions from England. B-1s dropped JDAMs. They flew 8 hours from Oman. F-117 stealth fighters also were involved in this attack. We can tell you that there is success. In addition to the surrenders, command and control is essentially non-existent, according to the Pentagon. Iraqi military leadership is losing its grip.
The confusion of Iraqi officials is growing. Their ability to see what is happening on the battlefield, to communicate with their forces, and to control their country is slipping away.
Now, the march to Baghdad continues. As you saw Greg Kelly there, they are continuing to move forward. General Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs,